The storm that night wasn't just weather, it was a prophecy. As lightning split the sky above Moscow, a priest whispered a curse. From an unholy marriage will come an unholy son. And when that child grew, he didn't just rule Russia, he remade it in his own image. A boy betrayed, a ruler crowned, a man consumed by fear. They called him Grozny, the Terrible. But Ivan wasn't terrible because of what he did. He was terrible because of what he believed God wanted him to be. There are more names the world tried to forget, and together, we'll remember them all. Please, like the video and subscribe to the channel. The journey into the shadows has only just begun. He was only 3 when the prophecy began to unfold. His father, Grand Prince Vasily III, was dying. A wound turned rotten, a body eaten alive by infection. On his deathbed, Vasily forced his nobles, the boyars, to swear loyalty to his son. But loyalty meant nothing in Muscovy. The moment Vasily died, the knives came out. The court turned into a battlefield dressed in silk and prayer, and at the center of it all, a frightened child watching his world disintegrate. Ivan's mother, Yelena Glinskaya, ruled in his name, but she lasted only 5 years before collapsing suddenly at dinner. Poison. Everyone knew it, no one proved it. Her death left the throne empty, and the wolves moved in. The boyars seized everything. They raided the palace treasury, paraded through Moscow in gold robes, and left the young prince in rags. Sometimes he ate scraps thrown by servants. Other times he watched them torture rivals for sport. Once, he saw a loyal mentor skinned alive. That's the moment he stopped crying. Inside that boy, mercy died, and something colder took its place. At 12, he began torturing animals, a rehearsal for the cruelty to come. At 13, he ordered his first execution, a noble torn apart by dogs in the palace courtyard. The boyars laughed no more. That day, Muscovy learned a new lesson. Its ruler was no longer a child. He was the storm his father had feared. At 16, Ivan placed a crown upon his own head, not Grand Prince like those before him, but Tsar of all Russia. The title came from Caesar, and the message was unmistakable. Ivan wasn't just a ruler, he was chosen by God. The coronation dripped with gold and incense. Priests chanted, bells thundered, and when the crown touched his hair, Ivan knelt before the altar, then whispered, "There is none above me but God." With the church behind him, Ivan moved fast. He struck at the boyars, stripped them of their lands, and filled his court with men who owed him everything. For the first time, Muscovy had a ruler who believed in the state more than the throne. He built armies, codified laws, and declared that no noble was above justice. It sounded righteous, it was strategy. Each reform weakened the old families and tied the people to him instead. Then came Anastasia Romanovna, his queen, his calm, his last tether to sanity. Together, they brought peace to a fractured realm. Under their rule, Moscow bloomed, a city of cathedrals, soldiers, and whispered hope. When he crushed the Khanate of Kazan, he built a monument to victory, a cathedral of fire and color, St. Basil's. Its towers spiraled like flames reaching for heaven, a symbol that Russia's new czar was more than mortal. But heaven has a habit of ignoring mortal ambition, because behind Ivan's triumphs, shadows were gathering. The boyars still watched, the storms still whispered, and the prophecy, the one about the child born of sin, wasn't done yet. Peace never lasts long in Moscow, not for kings, not for sinners who call themselves saints. In 1560, Anastasia fell ill. She had been Ivan's anchor, his voice of reason, his only softness. But within weeks, her skin turned pale, her breath shallow. Then she was gone. The doctors called it fever. Ivan called it murder. He accused the Boyers of poisoning her, the same men who'd taken his childhood, his mother, his trust. Her death tore something loose inside him. The Tsar, who once prayed for guidance, now demanded vengeance. He wandered the corridors of the Kremlin at night, muttering prayers that sounded more like curses. He saw assassins in every shadow. He saw devils in his counsel. He saw God's hand, not as mercy but as wrath. Those who had once ruled by his side were dragged to dungeons. Confessions were carved from flesh, and every cry echoed through Moscow like a hymn to fear. Ivan's faith warped. He began to believe that God had chosen him to purge Russia of the unworthy. It wasn't cruelty anymore. It was purification. The young ruler who built cathedrals now built torture chambers. And as his sanity fractured, so did his empire. His most loyal general defected to Lithuania. Armies he once commanded crumbled under rebellion. Enemies pressed at his borders. Friends vanished. By 1564, Ivan walked into a cathedral, laid his crown on the altar, and declared to his stunned court, "You have betrayed me. I will rule no more." But even in exile, the people begged him to return. And Ivan, the boy who learned to control fear, realized the most terrifying truth of all. They needed their monster back. When Ivan returned to power, he did not come back as Tsar. He came back as something else. In 1565, he created the Oprichnina, a kingdom within a kingdom, carved out of Russia like a wound that refused to heal. The old state, the Zemshina, remained under normal rule. But the Oprichnina belonged only to him. Ivan filled it with his black-clad enforcers, the Oprichniki. They rode on black horses, carrying severed dog heads on their saddles, symbols, they said, of loyalty and vengeance. They were judge, executioner, and priest. Where they rode, silence followed. Whole families vanished overnight. Nobles were stripped of land, titles, and dignity. Women were dragged from their homes. Torture chambers filled faster than churches. They called themselves the children of darkness, and they believed that to serve Ivan was to serve God. To defy him was to defy heaven itself. And Ivan, he believed it too. He spent his mornings in prayer, his afternoons in interrogation, his nights in blood. He signed death warrants between hymns and ordered executions between blessings. When his own capital grew too quiet to fear him, he turned on Novgorod. Convinced that the city planned to defect to Lithuania, he rode north at the head of his Oprichniki, a holy army of terror. For 5 weeks they burned, looted, and slaughtered. Monks were roasted alive in their cloisters. Children were drowned in the frozen Volkhov River. The snow turned black with ash and red with blood. When it was over, Novgorod, one of Russia's oldest cities, was nothing more than a graveyard of faith and frost. And still Ivan prayed, because in his mind this wasn't murder, it was salvation. By the late 1570s, Russia was a kingdom of ghosts. Cities burned, fields rotted, and silence ruled where life once was. The Oprichniki had done their work too well. The empire Ivan built was choking on fear. And yet, the Tsar still searched for enemies. When none remained, he began to find them in his own blood. One night, in a fit of rage, he struck his heir, his beloved son, across the head. The boy collapsed. Blood poured into the silence of the throne room. The Tsar fell to his knees, cradling the dying prince. He screamed for God to undo it, But heaven had stopped listening long ago. From that moment, Ivan ruled over nothing but shadows. The Oprichniki he once commanded were gone, executed or broken. The empire he forged trembled on the edge of collapse, but he kept his crown, because to remove it would mean admitting he was human. They say in his final years, Ivan spent hours locked in prayer, his body shaking, his eyes bloodshot, begging for forgiveness he didn't believe he deserved. And then, one March evening in 1584, as he prepared for a game of chess, he slumped forward, stone dead. The board overturned. Black and white pieces scattered across the floor, like angels and demons fleeing the body of their creator. When the priests came to take him, they said his corpse was smiling, and those who saw it whispered, "The Tsar isn't gone, he's just changed form." Because centuries later, his shadow still lingers in palaces, in prisons, in every ruler who confuses fear for power. The world remembers his crown, but forgets his curse. They called him Ivan Grozny, the Terrible. But maybe terrible isn't the right word. Maybe he was something worse, something eternal, not a man of God, but the god of fear itself. He was the first to crown himself Tsar. But long before the throne, the monster was already forming. Power didn't create him. Fear did. There are more stories like his, more names the world tried to bury. Subscribe to the channel, and together, we'll remember them all.